July 12th is when I'm recording this video. Moon went into Cancer. I was waiting for that to do this video. Going to talk about a little bit of the forecast for this week. I talked about the lunation that's going to happen on the 14th on my last video that started off for members, and I decided to release it publicly. I have some thoughts about this week, but to be straight up, I have some thoughts. And as Mercury is in the sun right now, the conjunction is happening here at 6:25 p.m. Pacific time. We're on my way to this here as we film. I had some things go through me, feelings and thoughts the last 48 hours. Some of it brought upon the last 4 weeks of the World Cup and seeing how the world's interacting online and in games, competitively, in great ways, horrible ways, organizations, corruption, the interactions, everything that's connected to the game and culture. I've been so immersed in, and I definitely needed it. And I'm not the only one. But along the way, I've had some thoughts and things that I was observing with, commentary and from people from other countries, how they view things, what kind of beer they like, to the thing we have in common, how we can't stand FIFA and the referees and stuff like that. You find the commonality, you find the differences, how do you maneuver it? And this has always been the case all over the world, and how we view ourselves in the communities, families, how we view ourselves as a city, country, state, whatever, crew, tribe. And this is something I talked about last year. I made a video about Jupiter and Cancer that I made in Australia. I'll try to remember to link it up there. I still think it matters. It matters because the moon's in Cancer, of this Mercury Sun conjunction in Cancer that we're doing, and then the lunation that's going to happen here. Basically, the new moon on the 14th, that will happen at 2:43 a.m. on the 14th, later on for other places. Now, for me, with Venus going into Virgo now, a Mercury-ruled sign, Venus conjunct the South Node at its last degree, a Mercury-ruled sign. Mercury's been important again, and I think is fundamental this month, and as we go to August, when Mercury will go into Leo. I will follow through on that thought. The biggest thing that's run through me here the last 48 hours has to do with memory, and it also has to do with envisioning. And it's interesting, I think, as myself and human beings, what we deal with memory when we remember things, and how we can't remember exactly the way things are, and our brain has a tendency to fill in the blanks, and we can be imaginative as we recall memory, or we use things like photographs or music, sense. Our five senses recall memory that's stored within us. We look at ancestry. There's many different ways of accessing memory. And it brings us to the present point of how we even look at ourselves and what we carry, the stories that we carry to ourselves to this moment. And then there's the future. And you might never hear the word future, I think, in the category of the sign of Cancer. But it is. Because I think memory, and then how it's brought into present time, feeds the future. And I think it's one big loop. I think it's a thing that goes back and forth on each other. Hear me out on this. I've been reading some things lately. I read an article in The Guardian about polycrisis, and it was written in the beginning of the year about, what have people done in places of crisis in their life when it seems like world crises, right? But how now the term polycrisis has come up because it's not like a war is just going on, a conflict. There's economics. There's all these different crises that put people in a certain place. And because of it, they were saying that people don't think about the future anymore like other generations have. And what was brought up was a scientific way of looking at this, and the psychological way of looking at it. And what I took from all of it was very interesting, because and it wasn't a surprise to me. If we're looking towards the future and we are filled in our present moment, overwhelmed, fried, anxiety filled, in fear mode, then what does one do when they're envisioning the future? What are they projecting out there, right? What do people do when they feel grounded in their life and they feel somewhat put together. And what do they think about the future? What are they walking towards or excelling towards? Basically, this article was talking about, because all the crisis is people don't think about the future anymore, they're down on the future. And obviously people are in crisis mode, they're just trying to survive. But humans have always had just to survive. I think the biggest differences these days is our interconnectedness because of technology, and knowing and seeing all the crises, or living in the modern world, and the crisis is developed from the modern world and technology, and how we are so intertwined as human beings with countries and culture. There is a separation because of the past, but at the same time, we're all connected. So, we maybe take on other people's crises, right? We bring it into our own and vice versa. So where does that lead to the future? And for me, I do come from a place in an age where there was a moment of time I remember in my life, I could just say late 70s as a kid going to 80s, that the future was something. Like, even though life was hard, definitely in the 80s, it was very difficult. Late 70s and the 80s in the United States economically, all through the 80s, basically when Reagan and the Republicans were in office. Even though I was young, I still had a vision of the future, and media and movies and certain things projected this thing, and it all had a sense of like what could be or what can be. And if you talk to people that are older than that, depending on their crisis, especially those who have came out of World War I and II or certain conflicts, their ability to think about the future and what was there was actually something they've truly walked towards because of the strife in their life. That the recovery of it, even though they might not have recovered traumatically, but having to deal with crisis in their life and to move on with everyday tasks, to move forward, in a sense, drove them because of something that was bigger, that was deeper, that was harder, right? So these are just examples. Now, what do people do now if they're not really feeling connected to the future, and generations feel like they don't have no future, as in like there's some material things like can't buy a house, can't afford to buy a house, can't afford to do this. Things are at a premium. There's a bigger gap between the wealthy and everybody else, basically. So can you be in a place of envisioning and dreaming about the future? And when you do, as this article talked about, it talked about how people, when they do think of the future, in a sense, your brain will fill in the blanks into the future by taking where you are now and in the past. And in a sense, it's a feedback loop. So whatever you did envision in the future, it does affect what you're doing tomorrow and how you're looking at yourself today. And it's not separate. So, saying this whole setup for you, when we're doing a Mercury-Sun conjunction in Cancer that touches upon the Jupiter and Cancer transit that we did in the last year, which touches upon the North and South node, North in Pisces, South in Virgo, the eclipses and the changes and the things we've had to let go in the last year and a half, and the story of how we're moving into a new world, a new age of fire and air, at least for the next several years. And you're stressed. Can you envision something? So on a Sun-Mercury day, and as we go into a full or new moon in Cancer, I'm going to say you do it regardless. And it's something that I've said on this channel for the last 4 years in the end, regardless of the transit. It had to do with your autonomy, and it also had to do with looking at your past, letting go of things, and it had to do with creation and finding the space where you're safe and comfortable so you can create from, for whatever reasons, to survive, or you want to be a part of something bigger. That's the deal, and we're at a transition point, and we're moving forward here. Forward and the future. So, you could talk to anybody who brings their past and it's really hard and they're stuck in certain parts of their life, right? But somehow you have to understand it, step away from it emotionally and look at it. That's what the mind is good for, I think, bringing in techniques like that. At the same time, if we're all in our head and we don't get in touch with the way we feel and where things are really based off, where things are coming from, and listening to our emotional selves or our bodies, we can't get anywhere either. We're running in circles. So I talked about on my last video in a week about how Mercury in Cancer here, I think it's very important during this retrograde, how it's bridging the mind and body and mind and thinking and emotions. And I think we're at a sweet spot this week, because I think the download is there, or the envisioning is there. And I encourage you to do this all week. This whole time that Mercury is going to be in Cancer, it's pretty much Mercury will go into Leo in the first week of August. So when it gets out of retrograde here in about 10 days or whatever it's going to be from the time I'm making this video, I encourage you to think of a future. And it doesn't have to be, it could be 20 years out, 30 years out. It could be next week. Short term it if you have to make it more tangible for yourself. But it's not just a thinking thing. Like what does your intuition, what does your emotional self and body tell you? And then connect it with your mind. Put it down on paper. Take a bath. Put it into something. Let it simmer. Add some spice. Add some ingredients. Make that soup. You know what I'm saying? But you get to envision. And you get to create things for the future. Even when it seems like all is lost. It's not the first time I've said this on this channel. I'm just using the transits right now. For those who watch astrology or following astrology, there's a lot to absorb and a lot to see, and a lot that you can take in that can freeze you or put you in a state of mind where you start thinking about the future and it's pretty dark, depending on how carried away you get with the astrology or the astrologer or the writer or the social media thing that you just took in, right? And it's even there where you got to pay attention to your body. I'm like, man, is this making me stressed? Is my nervous system gone? Or does this give me something practical? And when it comes to thinking about what's next, the inevitable, like what we do, what is it? Now, the other half of this is you don't know and I don't know what the hell's going to happen. And can you come to terms with that too? So I think you get to be futuristic and think about the future. And at the same time, you could do two things at once and go, well, and again, I don't know what's going to happen and how much I attach to all that, how it could throw me off and put me in these certain states where I'm frozen. Look at that. Right? Because in one sense, it gives you a break if in the end, especially with astrologers, we're trying to predict and we're trying to understand cycles and we're given this knowledge that's been passed down through the ages and we kind of hit upon things and we hit upon themes, At the same time, you can't know it all. You never know it all. I don't know how it's going to play out. If you ever run into somebody who's going to tell you, like, I know exactly what it is, I'm going to say they're full of it. They're full of shit. And if it does happen, it's a small percentage of the time. Like there's things I hit with my clients that are right on sometimes. I do not pride myself on that. I don't advertise that, and I don't want to base my code on something like that. What I want to base my code on is being realistic about the situations with myself and people in the world and taking things in, assimilating it, understanding it, tearing it apart and putting it back together from like a multifaceted approach. The mind situation, the body situation, the emotional situation, the heart situation. So these are the thoughts I've had. I think as human beings, our minds are so powerful in what we do and what we create with them. And I also have seen it just create a definite tangent of hardship, and where I feel someone in a sense can really block themselves from what they really want to get to, even if it's just a sense of calm and groundedness, that your mind will definitely play tricks on you. And there are situations and people out there who are purposely playing tricks on you and basically fucking with your mind in the astrology world. So we have to be careful of that. That's my message here. I'll go really quick here. Basically, as I make this, we're brewing with a Venus square Uranus square that's happening here. Venus immediately in Virgo is not only hitting the south node and in a sense ruled by Mercury, and it's Mercury Sun conjunction that's happening, but Venus in Virgo is squaring Uranus. And this is a toughie because I think depending on the regimen and system that you have of how you deal with your senses and how you take care of yourself, whether it's resource-wise or monetarily, things like this could be exposed. And a transit with the South Node and Uranus coming in can kind of show you and surprise you, crack it open. It could be something in one's relationships. I'll say this for the Pisces and Virgo and Pisces risings, definitely. Something that's been brewing, or one last thing you got to finish up, as I talked about on my last week's video. But Venus-Uranus does crack something open, and I think Uranus and Gemini squaring Venus, can bring another type of insight. And Mercury, that rules Uranus and Gemini and Venus and Virgo, is at the heart of the sun. You're going to catch a lot of traditional astrologers online saying, no matter what anybody says about, the sun's burning Mercury and it's powerless. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think when Mercury goes to the heart of the sun, does one take actions from there? Yeah, one can send out an email blast during a Mercury retrograde. That's a sweet spot. But I think it's just a fertile ground, especially when we're coming into a new moon in Cancer on Tuesday. Don't get thrown off by that stuff. Decide for yourself, by the way. Mind, stomach, body. You put it together. We get into that. Moon goes into Leo after the new moon happens there later on the 14th. We do one of the official Uranus sextile Neptune trines that are going on. A lot of people have been talking about these sextiles and the aspects that are happening to outer body planets. Listen, people, when stuff like this happens, from what I've studied and read, it takes years for us to really understand what's going on in those places. When the inner body planets hit these places, I think things in the chapters of that years-long story sometimes reveal itself to us. But we do acknowledge stuff like this. But to get caught up here for the whole summer about a particular, all these outer body planets and the sextile aspects they're making and whatever else, yeah, we can talk about the future as much as we want to envision it, and I'm all for it. It's just how it's done, and then what is done from that place, and then how it's projected out and how it's communicated, right? So think about what you've seen, read about all this astrology, right? And think about the banter that you've read and seen, and everyone trying to one-up each other or take people down. Is that the future they're envisioning with their present actions? And if you were one to be conscious about your present actions and look at the bigger astrology of it, then what actions would you take? Would they be about tearing people down or infighting, right? Because people can claim what they want in the future or claim their way of what the transits are going to do. But I'm looking at their actions in real time. In their personal lives, if they're showing it, and with other people, especially if they're astrologers and giving forecasts. So it's like, you could talk all you want, but what are you really doing, right? So are you projecting that vision in the future, and it's a certain way, and it's to get clicks and likes and to create drama? Remember, that comes back into your present moment now, as I talked about in this video. You ain't gonna see me doing that. Moon goes into Virgo on the 16th, which you got more Mercury coming this week. You see as Mercury's doing it here, it hasn't gone away. Uranus trines Pluto officially on Friday the 17th. I dig this. I think this is massive chapter moment because of one of 6 maybe trines or 7 trines we're going to do between Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius here. I've talked about on this channel about a general strike that's being planned here in 2028, May 1st, how it's going to be exact trine that's happening around that time. So from that point of view, from the labor worker point of view, for the people, for the people who come from the pueblos, from the city, from the dirt, I like this in the long term, but you got to do the work, and you have to know where you stand here in your mind and what you do with your mind and what comes up in the ideas and how they could be adding to the future, envisioning the future. Which way do you want to do it? What do you want it to be? And once you see something, what are the small steps in a sense of what you could do for yourself in the immediate time using the power of your mind? Look to the Aquarius and Gemini parts of your chart for more insight on that. We get to the 18th, Moon goes into Libra, more air. And then we get to the 19th where Mars sextiles Saturn there basically on the 19th. I'm going to keep it at that. Mars and Gemini and fire there, which adds to the fire and air story. The next day on the 20th, Jupiter trine Neptune. I'm going to do another video on this. And then we have the wild week that's going to come up next week that starts off with a Jupiter opposite Pluto, and then it goes into the Sun going to Leo, and a bunch of things you're going to see there. That it's was on my mind on this impromptu video. I'll put it for members first for a couple hours. I'm going to get this one out there because I want people to think about this future thing that I've been pondering. So when I'm thinking about my own future this last couple weeks, I've actually been thinking a lot about my future during the World Cup because my mind shuts off and I'm caught up in the game. But then there's moments in the game where I'm like on a tangent somewhere else. I can handle that, by the way. I can balance those things. And then like conversing with people I know over the last 4 months on, on message and my WhatsApp from all over the world on my Instagram who are fans of the game, and we're talking, people from all over the world that I know. And I'm like, oh, all over the world, and I want to go all over the world. How can I make that happen for my future? What do I need to do now to set myself up for something like that? And some of the things besides the games and whatever that I talked about with people from all over the world was like, had something to do with more. It was very simple. It's like, hey, can't wait to see you. Or hey, you're always invited when you come out here. We'll have lunch, right? We'll chill, talk astrology, go see a game, right? Simple things, but the good things. That's what I want in my future. It's not that complicated, actually. How I want to color it in, how I use my imagination in that, I've let myself go, and I will let myself go. I'll let myself have that, because I know somewhere all that in the palette of the future and what I'm putting out. I see myself old or whatever. I do. Do I see myself in other ways? Do. Sometimes it's really dark, but most of the time, especially in the last 2 months when I've had challenges in my real life challenges, when I've been thinking about the future, I'm like, oh, when I get the chance, I'm doing this. And when I get this certain thing taken care of, I've set myself for this. And all I see is my silhouette. And past, like from behind, and past my silhouette, sometimes there's mountain ranges, sometimes there's a beach, but it's me and the wind blowing and me just staring at it all. And it makes me feel really good. Now, when it comes to politics and everything else, there's times I see myself in a fight, the good fight, but I'm not alone in it. I see myself with other people, strangers I've never met, somehow, some way, taking the step forward, right? So that's the way I'm feeling and thinking. And that's the bridge I'm making between my body and my mind. And why not? Why not? I'm not going to get caught up in the other stuff. It's real easy. So I challenge you to think about this and to meditate on this kind of stuff and see what your body tells you. Whether it's here on Sunday, you're watching with the Mercury Sun, or as we go into the new moon this week in Cancer. I really want you to gauge what this is, okay? And see what comes up for you. I appreciate all of you, my members who support me on Patreon. I got another interview that's going to pop up there too. Eventually we'll go out publicly. To my YouTube channel members, thank you. All my new subscribers that have come in the last couple months, because there actually have been a bunch of you. Thank you for everything. Well, saying that, have a great week, and I'll see you on the next video.